So this example is going to begin a slide translation. So the slide translation simply means that you are cutting it out and literally your pattern is just going to repeat all in the same direction. So it's called a slide or a translation. You'll probably hear me refer to it as either or both words. So just make sure that you know what I'm talking about when I say either one. But basically all I have to do is cut this out and slide it down and attach it. Same thing if I had multiple shapes. I'd be cutting this one out and sliding it down to attach here, and cutting this one out and sliding it over to attach here. So either way is going to work. It's completely up to you. You just do want to make sure that you are following the correct procedures there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. Once again, making sure that I keep it very neat on both parts of it because I am using the entire piece to create my stencil. So if you have a knife and you are comfortable cutting with X-Acto knife, this can be a good example of when that would be useful. But I find that if we are careful with our scissors, they work pretty well. So I've got that cut out. So then the next thing that I would do would just be literally pick it up, slide it down, and make sure that it's attached at the bottom. Again, I'm just going to tape it on there. Make sure my corners are lined up perfectly, or as close to it as I can. And then just tape it down. As usual, I'm just going to cover the rest of my seam a little bit more to create a bit of a stronger stencil. I just find that when I cover the seam more, my stencil is less likely to mess up on me or to go wonky or to come apart. So then, as usual, my next step would be to go ahead and start onto my piece of paper. And I'm just going to make sure that things are lined up along the edge there. Again, that's more of a personal preference. You do not have to start on the edge. You can start in the middle and work your way around. Trace very carefully. Move your fingers around on the stencil so that you can hold it down, especially when you have a small part like that. It can be helpful to actually literally pick your finger up and just move it because the rest of the stencil doesn't have to be held down if you're just drawing one line here. So then my stencil is literally just going to slide down. Going to line it up again nice and carefully and then just trace it. And then I'm going to move my paper up so you can see at the bottom. I'm just lining it up again. And I'm just going to trace that line down. Not quite, there we go. Trace that line down. And then I'm going to do the same thing up here at the top. I'm going to put my stencil on there again. And I'm just going to trace it. So then the next one is just going to go directly over. Now you could, at this point, flip it the other direction if you wanted to and create your pattern going the other way, or you could just have them all going the same way. It's completely up to you at this point. You can shift it to where they're a little bit off. You can have them line up and match perfectly. For this example, I'm just going to have them line up and match. But remember that you do have some freedom in exactly how you start that second row and the third row and so on and so forth. Or columns, if the case may be. So then I'm just going to slide it down. So you will definitely be able to tell that this type of tessellation is the easiest one to create and to draw. But that also means that it's not as much of a challenge, and sometimes it's not quite as fun because there's not as much that you can do with it. So keep that in mind as you are making your decision about which type you want to use. And also remember that your paper is pretty small. We are just working on a 9 by 9 inch piece of paper for this one. Mostly because I do want you guys to feel comfortable with challenging yourself on this project. Since the hardest part is truly creating that stencil. And I will give all of you guys class time to create that stencil because it is challenging. Slide it up one last time to just check that corner. Everything's all drawn in there. So then the next thing that I'm going to be doing, once again, is going to be to go ahead and outline. I'm going to use my ultrafine tip Sharpie again this time. And I am going to use a ruler on this one because all of the lines are straight. So for me, when I have all of my lines being straight, I definitely want to use a ruler so that it's nice and neat and precise. Now on the shorter lines, I can use the straight edge of a protractor. Or you could stick with the ruler. It's completely up to you. I tend to like to use the protractor just because it is a little smaller. Just a bit easier to maneuver. And once again, I'm just going over all of my lines, making them nice and straight. And again, you can definitely work on one shape at a time, or you can kind of just do the whole pattern at once like I am. There's not a real right or a wrong. A lot of this project is very much up to you all. So how much do you want to challenge yourself? Use that as you determine which type of tessellation you want to do. And then do you want to try to do an actual shape? I'll show you an example that is a bird, an example that is a boat. There are tons of other examples online that you can look at. There are some that are included on Google Classrooms. But you can definitely try to create an actual specific object, or you can do more of a pattern-based thing like the examples that I have shown you so far. So I'm just going to continue tracing this along. You can change up the color. Like if you wanted to do some of the shapes outlined in one color and some of the shapes outlined in another color, that's fine. So then once we do have all of our lines on our tessellation completely outlined, then the next thing we're going to do is, as usual, just to erase those pencil lines that we don't need anymore. And then we'll start talking about how to finish these out whether we want to use colors or patterns or images, whether you are using an actual object and you're going to turn your entire pattern into that object. We'll talk about all those types of things once we get to that point. Your first step, well, the first step is to watch the things that are posted on Google Classrooms. Make sure you understand what a tessellation is. And then there will be a quiz for this unit that is going to be on Google Classrooms as well. And then you will have to make a selection as to which type of tessellation you want to do before you can truly begin creating. So here I'm just lining back up because I didn't draw that line quite low enough. So remember to turn the page whichever direction helps you the most. I know that sometimes that means you can't necessarily see exactly what I am doing. I do my best to try to make sure the whole thing's on, but sometimes I just get working and forget that I'm filming. So as with anything, the more you practice with this, with creating any of the types of tessellation stencils, all of the practice is going to help make the end result much stronger, and you'll get more comfortable with what you are doing. So I definitely do recommend trying more than one stencil before you figure out exactly which stencil you want to use. Just because, like sketching, your first example may not necessarily be your strongest example or your strongest idea. And it's okay to know that and to go with a different idea. So there we go. I've got my slides translation ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do would be to erase my pencil lines. So now I've got my slide. I've got my reflection. And on the other side of that one, you can't quite see because I have some of the lines through it, but I've got my rotation. And then this one is also a rotation. So once again, I'm going to be continuing to work on these and continuing to develop them so that you can see exactly what all of your options are, sort of how to do them. But I want you guys to be creative with this project. Challenge yourself, figure out exactly what it is you want to show through this project, and go with it.